There will be, though, some sunnier spots for the likes of northern Scotland, so here we'll see the best of the brightness during today. But for many of us, those temperatures will be around average for the time of year, between 12 and 14 degrees Celsius. As we head into this evening, if you do have any bonfire night celebrations tonight, it should stay largely dry, but again, I can't rule out the odd spot of drizzle to watch out for, particularly across those western areas. But otherwise, widespread blanket of cloud for much of England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Again, the best of those clearer spells overnight are going to be reserved for northern areas of Scotland, where you've got the best chance of seeing some starry skies. Because, though, the clear spells are here, this is where we'll see temperatures drop off a little bit more as we head into the second half of the night. So we could see a touch of patchy frost around first thing on Monday morning for northern Scotland, but elsewhere temperatures will be holding up more in the single-figure marks, generally a little bit colder than where we have been over recent nights, but certainly 7 to 9 degrees Celsius for most. As we head into Monday, for many of us, it is a very similar picture with widespread grey skies and remaining fairly drab and gloomy. But a slight change in wind direction could provide a little bit more in the way of brightness to arrive into the far southeast, but also for the likes of Western Wales, Northern Ireland and parts of Western Scotland as well, may eventually see the sunshine poking through during the latter stages of the day. Temperatures again around that 12 to 14 degrees Celsius mark, but as we head into the middle part of the week, whilst the cloud is going to remain, temperatures should climb up a little bit more, a bit milder.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're giving you the chance to win everything you need to celebrate the festivities. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday with Michael Portillo. It is the 3rd of November. On this date in 1493, Christopher Columbus landed on Dominica. and so Europeans discover the Americas. In 1908, William Taft was elected 27th President of the United States, and in the week ahead we shall discover who's going to be the 47th. Join me over the next 2 hours as I explore politics, culture and fine dining. The Labour government set out its budget last week. We shall discuss whether it will bring about economic growth and how united the Cabinet is behind spending plans which favour health and defence, but not other departments of state. Do the opening months of this government provide some easy targets for the new leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch? Are the United Kingdom's museums facing a crisis due to their controversial collections? Should they display human remains or the artwork of a painter who abused his daughters? How can museums balance preserving history with evolving public values? Journalist Eitan Smallman will join me. A portrait of staunch socialist Ellen Wilkinson, Red Ellen, who once rubbed shoulders with Trotsky, now hangs proudly in the Chancellor's office, replacing former Chancellor Nigel Lawson's portrait. The swap was revealed when the Treasury put out a photograph of Reeves on the eve of her all-important budget. Who was Ellen Wilkinson, and is the Chancellor's admiration for her of concern? Journalist Eleanor Mills will join me. And in news to get your Thai food taste buds tingling, acclaimed Austrian chef David Thompson is bringing a new modern Bangkok-inspired menu to London, and he'll be here to share some sensational flavours. Before all of that, your headlines with Katie Bowen.
Michael, thank you. A very good morning to you. It's just gone 11 o'clock. Your top stories this hour. Following her victory in the Conservative Party leadership election yesterday, Kemi Badenoch has vowed to ensure a fresh start for the party ahead of announcing her shadow cabinet. Kemi Badenoch won more than 53,000 votes in the contest, while rival Robert Jenrick received 41,000. Mrs Badenoch is expected to name her shadow cabinet in the coming days ahead of their first meeting on Tuesday, with former contenders Robert Jenrick, Tom Tugendhat, Mel Stride and Dame Priti Patel reportedly open to front-bench positions. Elsewhere, Labour MP Dawn Butler shared a social media post accusing Kemi Badenoch of representing white supremacy and blackface shortly before she was elected as the new Tory leader. The Brent East MP has since deleted the repost from her X profile. Neither Downing Street nor Dawn Butler have made any comment on the post, while Camilla Tominey asked former Conservative Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng about it a short time ago.
She's a race baiter. Why has she still got the whip?
Look, that's up to Labour.
What do you think, genuinely?
I genuinely think that, given what she said, she should have the whip removed from her. There should be some discipline and some disciplinary measure against this kind of really hateful device.
I was reminded.
The fallout from Rachel Reeves' budget continues today as she explained that the money raised through changes to inheritance tax for farmers will go back to public services. Speaking this morning, the Chancellor said that farmers as well rely on good public services, including the NHS and schools, adding that the funds generated by these tax changes will also put public finances on a firm footing. When challenged by Camilla Tominey on the inheritance tax changes, Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray, said that the existing features of the inheritance tax system will still apply.
This means in practice is that in most cases, if you have a couple who are passing on a farm to the next generation, they will get £2 or £3 million, which is not subject to inheritance tax. So above that £2 or £3 million, so paying no inheritance tax on that first £2 or £3 million, above that, the rate will be half what it is for everyone else.
Elsewhere, a joint investigation from both Channel 4 and the Sunday Times has revealed the full details of the property estates owned by King Charles and Prince William. The investigation shows the vast array of commercial property the royal family has built up from the time of medieval monarchs. Their contracts with public bodies are said to include a £37 million agreement with the Ministry of Justice and an £11.4 million deal with the Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Trust. A spokesman for the Duchy of Cornwall said that it was a private estate with a commercial imperative, while the Duchy of Lancaster said that their business complies with all relevant UK legislation and regulatory standards. It comes as Prince William travels to South Africa this week for his Earthshot Prize award ceremony. The prize is hoped to recognise environmental solutions to repair the planet. To the US, where there are now just 2 days to go until the election, and shock polling from a traditionally Republican Iowa has placed Democratic candidate Kamala Harris ahead of Donald Trump by 3 points. It comes as Kamala Harris appeared overnight in a comedy sketch on Saturday Night Live in New York, where comedian Maya Rudolph dressed as the current vice president. Polls elsewhere in states such as Pennsylvania and Michigan showed that the two candidates are tied ahead of Election Day on Tuesday. A teenage boy has been charged with attempted murder after a 13-year-old girl suffered multiple stab injuries in East Yorkshire. She was stabbed on Friday morning and was known to her attackers, according to Humberside Police. 6 teenagers were initially arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after the girl was found at the side of the A63 in Hessel with life-threatening injuries, including lacerations to her neck, abdomen, chest and back. The victim remains in a critical but stable condition in hospital. It's understood that police investigating historical sex offence allegations against actor and comedian Russell Brand have handed a file of evidence to the Crown Prosecution Service. A statement from the Metropolitan Police late last night said that following an investigation by Channel 4's dispatches and the Sunday Times in September 2023, the Met received a number of reports of sexual offences between 2006 and 2013 from women in London and elsewhere in the country. A file has now been handed to the CPS for their consideration. Brand has denied the allegations against him and said his relationships were always consensual. Those are your latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Michael.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Many thanks, Katie Bowen. The budget was a major event in that it contained big increases in taxes, government spending and borrowing. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, used the word growth frequently. But will the squeeze on the private sector encourage entrepreneurial activity? Does the government in its entirety agree that they're not raising tax on working people when it raises employers' national insurance and reduces the starting point at which that is paid? Is the Cabinet happy to see money poured into the National Health Service while other departments scrimp for money? I'm joined by Matthew Lesser, former head of broadcast for the Labour Party, Madeline Grant, Telegraph economist, and sketch writer Patrick O'Flynn, former MEP and columnist. Good morning to you all. Welcome back to GB News. Matthew, what do you think is going on in the Labour Party? What ructions are there? What sides, what debates about the budget?
Well, I think there is, as you said in your introduction, Michael, some disquiet that those departments that aren't protected, either protected or being given a boost, so the NHS, education, which is actually the education money is mostly earmarked for buildings, and the defence budget, that the rest of government spending, particularly in years 3, 4 and 5 of this government, when what's now being sort of termed the sugar rush of the initial spending is over, that those departments, so things like transport, justice, things that matter day to day almost as much as the health service, you could argue, are going to be really squeezed with very, very anemic increases in their spending. So I think that there are some unhappy cabinet ministers round the table this morning. I think the wider political issue is that there is some disquiet on the backbenches, I think, especially these new backbenchers with very marginal constituencies. There may be a lot of them, but a lot of them have very small majorities, are worried about how they sell the budget at home. And the feeling is where is the message? Where is the story? And we're beginning to see there was an interesting quote in the Telegraph today where it's saying, where is the... we haven't had a story since Keir's become leader. So when people are beginning to say not just where's the story now, but they're disquiet about there being a story overall, the big picture, the narrative in the political jargon, then that's when people are worried. So I think that Rachel Reeves may have been cheered to the rafters when she spoke to the Parliamentary Party this week, but I think this weekend there's more disquiet.
Matthew, on the first point about the departmental ministers, can that be solved by another series of tax rises later in the Parliament?
Well, I think that Rachel Reeves and the Treasury would say their hope is that the OBR forecasts on growth are wrong, and therefore that effectively what you do is they get growth up, get tax income up and from existing taxes, and therefore you don't have to impose new taxes later on in the Parliament. But it's a big bet. So otherwise they will either have to they will have to do those spending cuts, or we'll have to look at extra tax rises. And I'm not sure, as we said that there's not much, fat to cut But I'm not sure what there is to do on taxes now, because they're running out of things to tax, you could argue. As we've seen with the response about the farmers, we can argue about that separately, but it's not. There are no easy targets left for Labour to do, and it's things like the winter fuel allowance they thought was an easy cut has clearly turned out to be a political nightmare.
Madeleine, I don't know what your connections are like in the Labour Party. What vibes have you picked up? I mean, I have a pretty clear idea of your own view of the budget, but at the moment I'm interested in what the Labour Party thinks of the budget.
Well, I think that what Matthew said was entirely accurate. I was sketching both the budget announcement on Wednesday and the follow-up debate on Thursday, and there was a lot of kind of... The people who were angling for a promotion were all standing up and saying what a wonderful budget it was, and does the Chancellor agree that she's wonderful and also the first woman ever to be Chancellor? There was a lot of these sorts of questions. But privately, a lot of people very, very worried. There's also, I think, real disquiet in rural seats. I mean, historically, Labour has not been a rural party at all. That partly explains why their Environment Secretary is a Croydon MP, because they just don't have anyone else to do that job until now. But now they have a lot of rural constituencies. But I think people who may lack the kind of muscle memory of dealing with agricultural matters and talking to farmers, and they're going to suddenly have an awful lot of very angry agricultural workers who have real questions about the changes that they've proposed. So I think there's disquiet for different reasons, partly reflecting the fact that they now have all these kind of different sorts of seats that they never had before.
And is some of the disquiet still going back to the earlier stories, the freebies scandal and the winter fuel allowance being removed from most pensioners? Is that still on their minds, do you think?
Absolutely. I'm sure that every MP will be getting an inbox full of messages from worried pensioners. And I think there was almost a bit of an echo of some of the complaints that Tory MPs had during Partygate, when they were kind of made to go on TV and look really stupid and defend the indefensible. Because it's not just Partygate, which was so many awkward interviews for MPs who were somehow involved in the kind of freebie gate, but also like having to kind of defend behaviour that just looks so bad to most people. So they're already feeling a bit smarting from that, and now they're having to do it all over again with a budget, and particularly lines like the £22 billion black hole that have just been completely blown out of the water by the OBR.
Matthew O'Flynn. Patrick O'Flynn. I was going to
You're merging us.
I was merging. I was going to say...
That would be great combination.
I was going to say, Patrick, Matthew was making the point that it's an unsaleable story. What do you make of the message? How do you think this could be sold?
Well, I think there is a story, but I think the story is Labour got elected on a false prospectus, right? And if you may remember the great coming of Tony Blair, whose one of his big things was, we were elected as New Labour, we will govern as New Labour. So they had the Ken Clarke spending restraints for the first couple of years that even Ken Clarke said later I wouldn't have stuck to them, but they did. The whole kind of NHS lobby groups were champing at the bit for more money, but Gordon Brown wouldn't open the throttle on spending. This was a time the economy was growing every year and had been for the previous 5 years, and yet Blair and Brown stuck to that agenda, and only when Blair got into his own false prospectus disaster over Iraq did it sort of unravel. And yet what we have here is Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer, the idea that they weren't planning a tax and spend budget just doesn't pass the sniff test. And the idea of the 22 billion black hole has fallen apart. The OBR sort of says there was sort of 9 billion of, there's one or two kind of unfunded liabilities in there. They've used this phrase about material difference, but it was thin gruel for Rachel Reeves to try and carry on this idea when she was just chucking at the NHS alone another £22 billion spending. So they've got elected on a false prospectus, not just on the economy, but also on things like that their extreme attitude to Britain's place in the world and its history. So you've had the Chagos giveaway, you've had the language on reparations, the dialogue beginning in the Commonwealth. They're really, I suppose the one thing you could say for Keir Starmer is if you were a left-wing Labour activist, who'd voted for him to be leader on a left-wing agenda and then been fuming at the fact he'd chucked all the left-wing stuff out of the window for the general election, he's picked it all up again. But I think it's a disaster for Labour. I think they'll be down in the low 20s in the polls soon. And I think the Tory voters who went on strike at the general election, some of them obviously went to Reform, will feel they were fooled by Keir Starmer projecting reasonableness.
I think you and I are the only two here who have been elected people in the past. Do you think voters will buy the idea that taxes have not gone up on working people? Do you think voters will buy the idea that this is a budget for growth?
No, they absolutely won't buy either of those ideas. And I think there's no theory of growth in this budget. I mean, you mentioned how does it help entrepreneurs? You know, Thatcher and Lawson, they had a sort of theory of growth. You incentivise wealth creation. You probably widen the gap between the average person who works hard or who chooses not to work hard. There has to be a get-off-the-sofa gap. And that's traditionally how the right kind of prompts economic growth. But just taxing more and crowding out private investment. The OBR, which generally leans slightly left of centre, couldn't find a growth-enhancing story in the budget at all.
Matthew, here is the predicament. I also, having dealt with voters and electors before, do not think it's possible to convince people that taxes have not gone up on working people. I don't believe it's possible to convince people that this is a budget for growth. You may want to argue with both of those, but it's a difficult position if that really is true.
Look, I mean, I think the problem is that the government has got itself in a mess about this phrase working people. I mean, because now we're all absorbing the tax rises, we've slightly forgotten last week's absolute car crash of people trying to define what is or isn't a working person, and then having to be redefined when it turned out the Prime Minister appeared to indicate anybody who owns a share, even one share in Greg's was enough to make you a member of the bourgeoisie, as it were. So, I mean, that was an absolute disaster. I mean, and talking, as Maddie was, about Steve Reid, the Environment Secretary, not only is he the MP for Croydon, but he has appeared in a pair of £400 wellies that were donated to him by Lord Alley. On a farm. Those are the sorts of things that people in the Labour Party are getting kind of annoyed about. That there's own goal after own goal after own goal. So I think it is. I think you can justify the budget. You can say that the tax rises needed to go up. I think you can justify the money in the NHS as long as the reform plan follows pretty soon along the way. But what you need to do is just, stop the own goals, stop the mistakes, and acknowledge what it is. And so, I was actually sent by a comrade from outside the country a screen grab of Rachel Reeves on Sky News, and the strapline is Rachel Reeves says she got it wrong on tax, and with an exclamation mark. And this is from somebody elsewhere in Europe. That's not a good look when people like that people are picking up on things like that.
Madeleine, the budget is not yet an omni-shambles, is it? It hasn't either fallen apart in the way that Liz Truss's budget did. It's just kind of a bit unpopular. It hasn't fallen apart at the seams. Is that fair?
I think that's fair, yes. I think the pound is going down against the value of the dollar, but not on anything like the scale that it did with Liz Truss. The cost of government borrowing has increased, which will make the fulfilment of the pledges that currently are in the budget harder to achieve. But as you say, this is not on the Liz Truss scale of things. However, I just think that surely politics ought to offer something a bit better than just we're better than Liz Truss. That seems a low bar to me,
Patrick, you were making a point a moment ago that you think Labour's headed for low poll ratings. Do you think in the history of this Labour government this budget will have an important place?
I do, because I expect it not to work in terms of any growth premium, and I also expect, given the balance of vested interests in Labour politics, for there to be overwhelming pressure to spend more money in those departments which haven't been furnished with enormous increases by the middle of the Parliament, and that might mean yet more borrowing or yet more taxes. So I think this is quite a long term. It might not be an omni-shambles within a few days, but it's a sort of slow basting in misery and failure.
Let's do a quick poll of the panel. Will Sir Keir Starmer be Prime Minister at the next election, running into the next election?
Possibly.
Possibly. Madeleine?
I think so, because as I understand it, they've made it significantly more difficult within the Labour Party to top.
We've never got rid of a leader, so that is one of the arguments.
It's not like the 1922 type stuff where you have
possibly,
probably.
Yes, because his one worthwhile quality is he's an absolute terrier, right? He's got enormous reserves of stamina and determination.
Yeah.
I will give him that.
And he can be ruthless when necessary.
Not necessarily an ideal situation. I mean, obviously, the Conservatives get rid of their leaders too often. But on the other hand, if you don't have the safety valve of getting rid of a leader, you find an election possibly under a leader you don't particularly like.
But who would be much better as well? This is the problem. I mean,
but we've literally never ever got rid of a leader historically.
No.
Pretty much zero leaders have been deposed.
Very good. Excellent discussion from Matthew, Madeleine and Patrick. You'll rejoin me in an hour's time when we're going to discuss whether Labour is making life easier for the new leader of the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch. After the break, I'll ask why several of Britain's museums face a crisis over controversial exhibits. I'll be back in 3 minutes. See you then.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tell us about this film, because it's obviously come from your own experiences.
We wanted to create something for the entertainment industry that wasn't just another kind of dull documentary. I mean, some of them are brilliant, they're very informative, but you kind of leave a bit bewildered and a little bit kind of flat. So we thought, I've got a passion for writing and you've obviously got an unbounded knowledge on the subject. Why don't we create a film with a kind of satirical look on eating disorders?
So this came it's been made 20 years after your own...
It is 20 years.
20 years,
practically to the day.
So Samantha, you suffered with OCD and an eating disorder as well?
Yes.
And that's when your mum became a counsellor, is that right?
A little bit later on, I think we spent a bit of time in the system and I realised that it wasn't working for us. So I took it on myself to learn as much as I could about the subject.
I call it a tragedy, probably the wrong word, but
suffering. No, it is a tragedy because mental ill health and eating disorders destroy the lives of not only the sufferers but their families as well.
But you've turned that into something so positive and so
it's amazing, really, that 20 years ago our story was just beginning, and 20 years on, we've done what we've done. But I have to say that very little has changed in the system.
I've heard that.
And I think that's what we're passionate about.
Yeah, so...
that was why we wanted to... I mean, I work with families every day and I see the destruction that eating disorders and other mental illnesses not just bring to the sufferer, but the whole family.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really passions me, because obviously 20 years ago we were there. And I just feel that so much more needs to be done. And I think with eating disorders, there is still a lot of misunderstanding around the subject.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Ditchling Museum, once informally known as the Eric Gill Museum, was established in 1985, 4 years before the artist's depravity came to public attention through a biography by Fiona McCarthy, which revealed that he had sexually abused his daughters. In 2020, after almost 80 years, Oxford University's Pitt Rivers Museum removed its famous collection of shrunken heads with sewn-up lips and eyes made by the South American Shuar and Ashwar people. How do museums decide what should be shown and what should be confined to storage? Can controversial exhibits be left on display? with suitable contextualisation in captions. Who would want to be a curator facing such controversial questions? For review, I'm delighted to be joined by journalist Eitan Smallman. Welcome to GB News. I think many people, when they hear that we're going to discuss museums or art galleries, think that it's going to be, that wokery question. But it strikes me, and I think it strikes you too, that this is not just about wokery at all. There are some really interesting ethical questions here. For example, I mean, let's start with this one, and there are several examples of it. Should we be displaying human bodies, the remains of human beings? Should we be displaying them in museums?
Absolutely. It's not just the usual suspects, young snowflakes, who are objecting to these things. They're just naturally cultural shifts, and people of all ages and all political persuasions may feel uneasy about displaying human remains of any kind, especially human remains that have been taken against the will of the communities or taken violently. Hilary Mantel led a campaign to remove a 7-foot 7-inch skeleton of Charles Byrne, known as the Irish Giant, from the Hunterian Museum. He had specifically said that he didn't want to be displayed and didn't want to be taken by anatomists, and yet was displayed for a couple of hundred years until a couple of years ago. He hasn't had the burial he requested, but he's no longer on public display.
Yes, Hilary Mantel had written about this person, about this life. And of course, there have been a number of examples of human beings who've been displayed because they were regarded, at the time at least, as freaks. I can think of a couple of examples of that. So are you pretty clear-cut about that this is no longer acceptable?
I think I'm not sure there's anything clear-cut about any of it. I did speak to some visitors to the Hunterian, and they knew that they obviously weren't squeamish. They knew there would be various exhibits in jars. It was when it came to a discussion about how those had arrived there and how they should be shown that I think there was much more complexity.
Byrne had been asked to be buried at sea, I think.
Yes, because he'd been treated as a freak in his life, and he specifically didn't want to be treated as a freak in his death, which is what happened.
And even though he's not on display, he's not been his remains have not been committed to burial, to a final rest.
So the director of the Hunterian says that the collection relies on its completeness, and that the skeleton should still be there to be used for research purposes rather than display purposes. But I think it's good that we have these discussions, and I think that there's just an understandable shift in our culture that human remains are no longer things that we just display without any kind of question or discussion.
Now, what kind of problems does the Wellcome collection face? The Wellcome collection has a collection, obviously, of bits and pieces of human beings, does it not?
So the Wellcome collection, until a couple of years ago, had a permanent exhibit called Medicine Man, and it's now been removed entirely after various discussions and various plaques being put up and discussions that were had. What sorts of things were on display there? So the reason that they gave for removing the exhibit was that it perpetuated racist, sexist and disablist portrayals of people. So a painting of a black slave kneeling down before a white man and various other kind of medical exhibits.
Right. I mean, that's a very specific example, that painting.
Yes.
But there were quite a lot of human organs on display, weren't there?
Yes. They also had a mummified man and all sorts of other human remains, which again brings up that discussion. I'm less sure about removing a whole collection of items, because I would want more context to be added. I think give more explanation, have more discussion, rather than just remove a whole permanent exhibit that was fairly popular.
You mentioned mummies, mummified, you mentioned. I mean, what about Egyptian mummies? I go and see Egyptian mummies without a tremor going down my spine. I don't think of these particularly as being human beings. Obviously, they were human beings. Does the fact that they're 4,000 years old make a difference, as opposed to 100 years old?
I think it's similar to the discussion that we've been having about reparations, where how far back do you go with the discussion, and the further you go back, the less bothered people seem to be.
Well, is the discussion in museums actually moving against, let's say, Egyptian mummies? Or are people saying, no, 4,000 years ago, this doesn't matter as much? What's the discussion?
Not yet. I think something like Charles Byrne is recent enough that you can know about him as an individual. You can have Hilary Mantel writing a detailed novel about him. So I think the discussion is starting there, but who knows where it goes from there.
I remember I was filming one of my railway journeys not all that long ago, and at Hanwell there's a collection of human brains, and I was handling a human brain, in front of the camera. I'm thinking that probably in the 8 or 9 years that have elapsed since I made that programme, that might not be so acceptable. I mean, obviously, it was someone's brain. It is completely anonymised. It was kept for reasons of scientific study. But nonetheless, it did belong to someone once.
I think what museums will increasingly do is try, if they have the information, to display more detail about who this person was and how this item came to be there. And that might then provoke more questions and more unease and disgust at the fact that that's on display at all. But the other thing that they're doing is displaying trigger warnings, which are controversial. But I think in a museum, if you're about to see a baby in a jar, I think it's perfectly reasonable to put up a label at the entrance to warn people. And it's a fairly low-risk thing for curators to do, because if there are going to be complaints, well, at least just put up a trigger warning and warn people in advance.
What about the slightly different category, Eric Gill, who obviously did deplorable things during his lifetime? How do we feel about his art being displayed? His art has largely been withdrawn, has it not?
Well, there's the Ditchling Museum of Art and Craft in East Sussex, which used to be informally known as the Eric Gill Museum. He was a celebrated local resident. Now they're understandably less enthusiastic about celebrating him, but he still exists. And I spoke to the director of the museum, and she said that she is uncomfortable about simply erasing people from the historical record. So she has some sympathy with younger people who don't want to subscribe to this idea that artistic genius trumps any other consideration or any consideration about someone's personal behaviour. But to simply erase him from the historical record means you can't understand the people that he inspired and the artists that came after him. They are still displaying some Eric Gill pieces, but fewer than they did previously.
I don't know whether you've considered the case of Richard Dadd. Richard Dadd had a psychiatric disorder and murdered his father and was confined to Broadmoor, but continued to paint and painted rather well in Broadmoor. I mean, is this one different because he had a psychiatric disorder? So, he was not guilty of a criminal charge. Should we feel differently about Richard Dadd from Eric Gill?
I have a feeling that what it comes down to is how much people value the actual art. So someone like Rolf Harris, for example, he was stripped of his CBE. The BBC reduced his obituary to about 20 seconds, hardly mentioning that he was a national treasure, that he was on our TV screens for decades. But I don't think anyone's going to be caring about Rolf Harris painting in a century's time, whereas Eric Gill's work has a bit more weight to it. And I think it will probably come down to that. But I think from now on, we won't be able to just remove the personal biography. I think that will be stuck together with the artistic legacy as well.
I said in my introduction, who would want to be a curator in such controversial times? But I suppose there might be a counter-argument that there's never been a more interesting time. I mean, curators are in the firing line, but it also means they're in the public eye. It means that they are making important decisions that contribute to the values of society. What do you think? Is it a good time or a bad time to be a curator?
I think it must be quite tricky, and they probably don't welcome all the publicity. I did struggle to get curators or museum directors to speak to me, and I understood that because there's very little to gain and a lot that they fear they have to lose by these controversies. But equally, these are debates that we're all having. So they're playing a crucial role in shaping them.
I think it's a thoroughly interesting topic, and as we said at the beginning, it's not just about wokery. There are some really interesting ethical questions to be addressed there. Thank you very much to Aiton Smallman. After the break, we'll be looking at the legacy of Red Ellen Wilkinson and what Rachel Reeves means by replacing Nigel Lawson's portrait in a hot office. Back soon.
Hello there, good morning to you. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. High pressure is still in charge for this second half of the weekend, so it's generally keeping things on a calm note. Light winds for most of us. There's a bit of a breeze out towards the west at times, but stuck underneath this high pressure system remains quite a lot of cloud. So for many of us, it's going to be grey skies throughout much of the day. We could see the odd spot of drizzle in places, particularly around some western coastal districts or over the hills as well, quite misty and murky. There will be, though, some sunnier spots for the likes of northern Scotland, so here we'll see the best of the brightness during today. But for many of us, those temperatures will be around average for the time of year, between 12 and 14 degrees Celsius. As we head into this evening, if you do have any bonfire night celebrations tonight, it should stay largely dry, but again, I can't rule out the odd spot of drizzle to watch out for, particularly across those western areas. But otherwise, widespread blanket of cloud for much of England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Again, the best of those clearer spells overnight are going to be reserved for northern areas of Scotland, where you've got the best chance of seeing some starry skies. Because, though, the clear spells are here, this is where we'll see temperatures drop off a little bit more as we head into the second half of the night. So we could see a touch of patchy frost around first thing on Monday morning for northern Scotland, but elsewhere temperatures will be holding up more in the single figure marks, generally a little bit colder than where we have been over recent nights, but certainly 7 to 9 degrees Celsius for most. As we head into Monday, for many of us, it is a very similar picture with widespread grey skies and remaining fairly drab and gloomy. But a slight change in wind direction could provide a little bit more in the way of brightness to arrive into the far southeast, but also for the likes of Western Wales, Northern Ireland and parts of Western Scotland as well. May eventually see the sunshine poking through during the latter stages of the day. Temperatures again around that 12 to 14 degrees Celsius mark, but as we head into the middle part of the week, whilst the cloud is going to remain, temperatures should climb up a little bit more, a bit milder.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The Treasury released a photo earlier this week on the eve of the budget of the Chancellor Rachel Reeves in her number 11 study with a portrait of Ellen Wilkinson in place of the Tory ex-Chancellor Nigel Lawson, whose special advisor I was. So Keir Starmer had already taken down portraits of Queen Elizabeth I, Sir Walter Raleigh and Margaret Thatcher in 10 Downing Street. Ellen Wilkinson was inspired by the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 and joined the Communist Party. She became a Labour MP in 1924 and helped to organise the Jarrow March, protesting against unemployment in 1936. She supported the Republic in the Spanish Civil War. She was a junior minister in the wartime coalition led by Winston Churchill, and she served under Clement Attlee after Labour's landslide victory in 1945. She died aged 55 in 1947 after contracting a bronchial disease. Joining me now is Eleanor Mills, journalist, founder of noon.org.uk and best-selling author of Much More to Come. Eleanor, very good to see you. So, what do you make of Red Ellen? Is it in any way surprising that our first female Chancellor would have a portrait of this woman in her office?
Well, I have to say, I thought it was a brilliant move by Rachel Reeves to have Red Ellen in her office. When Rachel first came into government, she said that she wanted to have on the walls of number 11 only art featuring women or by women. So I think having one of Labour's real kind of early kind of feminist icons on her wall was quite a good idea. I would slightly disagree with the way that you've introduced Red Ellen in that intro, because, for instance, she was actually the first female education minister. She was only the second woman to be in a Labour cabinet. And you very much bigged up the kind of communist leanings of her. But actually, she left the Communist Party so that she could be a Labour MP. And after 1917 and the Russian Revolution, pretty well anyone who was on the left in the UK kind of had a bit of a kind of communist moment. They thought that that was the way forward for workers. And actually, I think she's inspirational because she came from a very working class family in Manchester. She's a real example of education kind of creating the woman. She was part of the suffragette movement in a big way. She really campaigned for women's suffrage. And I think what we forget is how many and how important female politicians, some of them were in the 1920s. And also women only got the vote, all women, so from 21 up, in 1929. So if you think when she first went into Parliament, only the 10th female MP, Ellen, she was really quite an incredible pioneer. So I don't think we should see her being on Rachel Reeves's wall as Rachel Reeves' communist tendencies, as I think you've slightly tried to imply there. I think she's more there as a feminist icon and as an early kind of icon of political possibility for women.
I don't think I did try to do that. Indeed, what I mentioned, for example, was that she was in Winston Churchill's wartime government as a junior minister.
Yes, she was as responsible for air raid shelters.
She was responsible for air raid shelters. So I think, you know, that in itself is an argument that rather deals with the idea that she was a dangerous communist.
Yeah, well, Churchill wouldn't have had her there if she was.
I don't think Churchill would have had her in the government, and she did, you know, important war work. And even though she'd been one of those who rather wanted to depose Clement Attlee as Labour leader,
yes,
nonetheless she was accepted into Clement Attlee's government, and as you say, into the cabinet. So perhaps there shouldn't be very much surprise about all this. Tell us a bit about her childhood. Then I hear she came from a poor background.
Yeah, her father had worked in the cotton mills in Manchester, but was a great believer in education, self-educated himself, and I think went on to become and worked in insurance, so he got himself out of the factories. And Ellen was obviously a highly intelligent child, and she was quite ill when she was young, and she was at home, taken out of school for a couple of years, and her father, when she was about 10 or 11, made her read the whole of Darwin and all sorts of other philosophers. So she was highly intelligent, then won a scholarship to Manchester University. So I just think it's very important for women these days to realise how far back these incredible, inspirational women go in terms of our political history. It's only 100 years since women got the vote, but even back in the 1920s, we had pioneers like Ellen showing us the way. Given that we just got Kemi Badenoch, Tory party's fourth female leader, which is definitely a feather in your cap, I think it's really important to think about where those kind of political campaigners began, where they came from, and for us to know that this history is actually quite rich and deep.
Yes, and although I was Nigel Lawson's special advisor, I can't think of any reason whatsoever why Rachel Reeves would want to keep a portrait of Nigel Lawson in her office. I mean, I thought he was a rather good chancellor, but, you know, I think his 1988 budget was about as much the opposite of the budget we've had this week as it's possible to imagine.
Well, I should think that's probably another reason why she decided she'd rather have Ellen there as well. And I do think we should also take a moment to remember that Rachel Reeves is our first female Chancellor of the Exchequer in 800 years of that office existing. And that when she first went into her office in number 11, the first thing she found was a personal Chancellor's urinal. Not much use if you're a lady. So I think that part of putting Ellen on the wall is about the degendering of those roles. If you remember Theresa May talking about kind of pink jobs and blue jobs, I think the Chancellor of the Exchequer in history has often obviously been seen as a blue job. It comes with a urinal. And so what Rachel Reeves is trying to do is to say, no, this is a job that can be done by a woman, and I'm going to have women on my walls to show that, and these incredible pioneering, campaigning women at that.
When she was Education Secretary, I think the school leaving age was raised to 15.
Yes.
I think education was made compulsory. I think that probably happened under her.
It was made compulsory for everybody to stay in school till 15 under her. And she had a very, very sticky wicket after the Second World War when the government came in 1945, because there was a huge shortage of teachers, there were shortages of textbooks, of desks. So she had a very difficult and quite depressing time trying to kind of get education back on track, because it was such a key part of what that Labour government were trying to produce.
And more of us might be familiar with her were it not for the fact that her life was cut off at the age of 55 in 1947.
1947, she died very prematurely early of a lung disease, which they said was because she had always overworked her whole life. And of course, she led the Jarrow March, which, although she did that back in 1936, it became much more important after the war and during the big Labour government settlement about what are we going to do to kind of help the poor, help the unemployed. But I think she'd always been a real beacon of kind of self-determination. I mean, in some ways, quite a kind of get on your bike, you know, you can do it kind of trajectory. And she really was a self-made and self-created woman. And I think that we should be fulsome in our praise for individuals who really pull themselves up from nothing and who show the way forward for others.
So people may be surprised to have heard all that on GB News. Thank you very much indeed, Ellen Mills. Still ahead, we'll be joined by renowned Australian chef David Thompson, who's back in London to delight Thai food enthusiasts with a new residency focusing on contemporary Bangkok-inspired menus.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Well, the first thing on in my mind when I heard about this is, what has this country come to when we're talking about getting kids as young as 6 years old to be jabbed weekly or however often it is, because they are too fat? Where are the parents in all of this? There's three things actually here that are important. Number one is we do not know the long-term consequences of these jabs. So if I had a child and I was going to let them have the jab, I would be feeling like I'm treating them like a lab rat, to be quite honest with you, because we don't know the long-term consequences. Secondly, the manufacturers are clear that some of the potential side effects can be very serious. We're talking about potentially pancreatitis, let's get my word out, and also it lists as a potential side effect thyroid cancer. Arguably, it's called the gamble jab, to be honest with you, because of these potential side effects at the moment. And then thirdly, I come back to the parents. Where are the parents in all of this? Because they are the role models. So it really is about parenting, and it's about parenting from being a role model yourself in terms of being slim and healthy, and not expecting a jab to take your place and other people to take your place. If you have children, they are your responsibility. Think before you breed. The other thing you need to remember with this is when you stop taking that jab, it is highly likely that you're going to put all the weight back on. Now, the thought of a child of 6 years of age, starting with that jab, conditioning them mentally to live with that jab, as far as I'm concerned, is absolutely not on.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Exciting news for lovers of Thai food. Australian chef David Thompson is opening a new restaurant, Long Chim. The name, which translates roughly as come and try, already has locations in Sydney, Perth and Dubai, and previously operated in Melbourne and Singapore. It marks a return to London for Thompson, whose Belgravia haunt Naarm closed in 2012, but that earned him accolades, including in 2002, the first Michelin star awarded to a Thai restaurant. David Thompson, thank you very much for joining me on a Sunday morning.
Thank you very much, Mike.
And congratulations on your return to London.
Oh, you know what? I've lived in Bangkok, I've lived around the world, and I know when to leave a country. When the police issue a sentence or a charge, I go to another country, and I find myself here.
So you've mentioned Bangkok there. What is your love for Thai food? Describe to us why you think Thai food is such a great cuisine.
It's endlessly complex and satisfying. It just resonates on the palate. For me, as a cook, it offers a challenge. And the way that you cook it is you chase taste. You don't follow a recipe, you follow your sense of taste. And so with all these dishes that you'll taste today, but also in the restaurant that we're opening, it's all about a sequence of taste and seasoning that has some balance.
You have prepared a lovely dish here, which
I have done.
Please say is piping hot.
I am.
What is this dish?
This is something called gengari gung, which is an aromatic curry of prawns.
Lovely looking prawns, yes.
They're not too bad. And it's with something strange called water bamboo, which we found up in Chinatown just the other day. And it's a perfect accompaniment. I'll just take a little.
Yes. Describe that perfect accompaniment to me again. Water bamboo. What is it? Water bamboo, yeah.
And you would not know of it, because I didn't know of it that much either. And it tastes like a little bit of like young coconut meat. So it's perfect with these prawns and this curry. And what you need to have with this curry, because this is the way that Thai food works, an interplay of flavours, this little cucumber salad on the side, and that helps to bring out the spice
Yes.
and the sweetness and the savoury quality.
I must say, all of this looks so lovely. The colours are so beautiful, aren't they, apart from anything else? So just while I set about trying this... Oh, there's a bottle of wine there. Should we have some of that as well?
Your producer said you were not allowed to have wine on camera, so I'll enjoy it and I'll explain it to you.
I think I'll have a little glass. What are you serving?
This is a Chardonnay. I had it the other day and it was so delicious. It's cheap as chips, but suave.
Excellent. Let's have that. Tell me a bit more about your venture. What has brought you back to London after all this time?
Opportunity and a brilliant position. And
position, where is it?
It's in Rupert Street, where I think my mother conceived me during the Blitz.
I think not.
I'm pretty sure. She doesn't talk about it that much. And it's in a wonderful position. And the little long chim has some legs about it and has some style, and it's such an engaging little building in the centre of town. Go for the sauce as well, because otherwise you won't get that much.
But I'm captivated by the taste already. It's wonderfully tangy. And that's brilliantly spicy.
That's what Thai food is. It's just, it picks you up, slaps you around a bit, and then puts you down politely.
So as the antidote, I'll have some of this lovely cucumber in your salad.
And when you taste it, it'll bring out the spices. It cuts the oiliness of the curry. Every accompaniment has a function with Thai food, and and the main function is to make the food taste better.
Exquisite dish. Tell me about the ambience in your new restaurant. You're recreating the sounds of Bangkok streets, aren't you?
No, it looks like a whore's boudoir.
OK.
Which is appropriate for Rupert Street. And it's a bit of fun.
Are you sort of... is it almost like the street food of Bangkok? Are you moving towards that end of things?
We started at that end of things, and then we moved on to a little bit more upmarket avenue rather than the street food. And so it's a little bit more refined. But what I want to achieve is the fun and the zest of Bangkok itself. It's not a serious place, though the food is serious. It's meant just to be convivial, to have some fun and to enjoy yourself, where the food is an adjunct. Hopefully it's more than an adjunct, but it doesn't take itself so importantly. And I get bored with restaurants that become a little bit too earnest, where you take communion rather than just have a meal.
What's it like running kind of an empire of restaurants around the world? I mean, mainly in Australia and Asia.
I'm very lucky. I've got people who I work with who manage it far better than me, and even better, they lie to me and say it's all fine. I love it when they do that.
Who's your chef in London?
I've got Payne at the moment, and then we've got a guy called Nat who's coming out. And they both have excellent provenance with me for many years. And they'll be running the place. I'll be coming in and out because, as I said, I flee the police often. And so coming back to Blighty will be a perfect thing to do.
You're on quite a brief visit to Britain at the moment, aren't you?
Well, I intended to be in here for a month, but I decided to stay for 3 months because the place warranted it. Just the staff need training, but also I need to make sure that the place has the stamp that I like and the quality that I want, and the customers have at least my respect to be here to set it up properly.
Yes, I entirely agree with all of that. What date are you opening?
Oh, they haven't told me that.
Oh, OK.
It's next Tuesday, I think.
Oh, wow, it's absolutely imminent.
More than imminent, it's looming.
And tell me the name of the restaurant and its location.
It's called Long Chim, which is at 36 Rupert Street in central London, just near my birthplace.
Fantastic. Thank you for bringing in this delicious food, and good luck to you. Thank you very much to David Thompson.
Have a taste of that wine.
I will.
It'll make your day go better.
You're watching Michael Portillo on GB News.
Drinking wine.
And that's Britain's news channel. That concludes the first hour of the programme. Please stay with me, because after the break, I'll be assessing with my panel Kemi Badenoch's star ratings, as well as discovering a newly formed orchestra, which is already receiving ecstatic reviews. See you in a few moments.
That's if you don't enjoy.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. It may be Sunday, but the sun is certainly lacking for many of us. Instead, we're left with anticyclonic gloom. Whilst we're used to high pressure being as fairly fine and settled conditions, often in autumn and winter we can find a layer of cloud stuck underneath it, and that is what we have at the moment. Widespread grey skies for the vast majority of us. There will be some outbreaks of drizzle around at times. The best of the sunshine is going to be reserved for northern Scotland, where we'll see the brightest skies. Temperatures generally around average for the time of year, between 12 and 14 degrees Celsius, but those stuck underneath that cloud will feel quite chilly, particularly indoors. That cloud will be remaining with us as we head into the evening and overnight period, so if you do have any fireworks celebrations this evening, it should stay largely dry, still though with the odd spot of drizzle around at times. The best of those clearer spells really remaining in place for northern Scotland. Elsewhere, it is going to be a very cloudy one, quite misty and murky around coastal districts, and the cloud will be lowering into this evening as well, so over the hills we could see some hill fog around at times to provide murky conditions here as well. That relatively similar pattern will continue right throughout the night. Where we hold on to the cloud, it does though mean that temperatures will hold up quite a bit, so most of us will see positive single figures at least. But if you do see a few clearer spells around again, particularly for northern Scotland, temperatures will drop off a little bit more here. There could be some patchy frost for the far north of the Highlands first thing on Monday morning. For many of us on Monday, we do it all over again. That cloud is really quite stubborn and is going to be persistent right throughout the day. But there are a few signs of a change. Perhaps in the far southeast we could see some brightening skies, as well as Western Wales, Western Northern Ireland and Western Scotland starting to see the sunshine poking through later on in the day. Temperatures down by a degree or so, now more between 10 and 12 degrees Celsius. And the outlook really is not particularly inspiring. Quite a lot of cloud for all of us, really persisting, some overnight fog to watch out for as well, but it will be turning a little bit milder.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could win Christmas on us this year. There's cash, £20,025 in tax-free cash to make your new year go with a bang. There's also £5,000 to spend on all the gifts. We've also got Christmas lunch for you, with £500 in vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. And finally, a festive GB News goodie bag. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Court cases.
A presidential dropout.
Assassination attempts.
This has been a US election like no other.
And if the polls are correct, it's on a knife edge.
On Tuesday night, stay up with us as the drama unfolds and America decides their next president.
We'll discuss what it means for them, for the world, and for our special relationship. America Decides, Tuesday night from 11.
Only on GB News.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I hope that I have the honour to be the first to wish you good afternoon as I welcome you to the second hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo on GB News. Kemi Badenoch has the difficult task of leading a divided Conservative Party, but perhaps things are easier for the party than anyone could have imagined on election day. So Keir Starmer's ratings have plummeted, the Labour Party has been ravaged by the scandal of freebies accepted by the Prime Minister and others in the Cabinet. Many thousands of prisoners have been let out, illegal immigration continues unabated without a plan to control it, and the budget has raised money by taxing jobs. We will review the problems and opportunities inherited by Mrs Badenoch. The newly formed Chromatica Orchestra, which debuted at Battersea Arts Centre on Tuesday the 8th of October, attempts to bring fresh energy to classical music by uniting talented early career musicians under emerging conductors. School-age musicians from across the country join the orchestra on stage for professional performances. The orchestra's lead will join me. Until recently, Germany was viewed as an exemplar of political and economic success. Angela Merkel was hailed as the leader of the free world, and its export-driven model seemingly ensured prosperity. But no more. A new book argues that Germany's politicians, bankers and industrialists are wedded to an outdated national plan that relies on exporting yesterday's technologies. Wolfgang Munchau, author of Kaputt, will be here. And finally, in our Taste of Britain, I'll be joined by London's only Michelin and Green Michelin star chef, Johnny Crow, who uses solely British produce to create his dishes at restaurant St Bart's. All of that ahead. But first, your headlines with Katie Bowen.
Michael, thank you. A very good afternoon to you. It's just gone midday. Your top stories this hour. Following her victory in the Conservative Party leadership election yesterday, Kemi Badenoch has vowed to ensure a fresh start for the party ahead of announcing her shadow cabinet. Kemi Badenoch won more than 53,000 votes in the contest, while rival Robert Jenrick received 41,000. Mrs Badenoch is expected to name her shadow cabinet in the coming days ahead of their first meeting on Tuesday, with former contenders Robert Jenrick, Tom Tugendhat, Mel Stride and Dame Priti Patel reportedly open to frontbench positions. Elsewhere, Labour MP Dawn Butler shared a social media post accusing Kemi Badenoch of representing white supremacy in blackface, shortly before she was elected as the new Tory leader. The Brent East MP has since deleted the repost from her X profile. Neither Downing Street nor Dawn Butler have made any comment on the post. Camilla Tominey asked former Conservative Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng about it a short time ago.
She's a race baiter. Why has she still got the whip?
Look, that's up to Labour.
What do you think, genuinely?
I genuinely think that, given what she said, she should have the whip removed from her. There should be some discipline and some disciplinary measure against this kind of really hateful divisiveness.
I was reminded.
While the fallout to Rachel Reeves' budget continues today, as she explained that the money raised through changes to inheritance tax to farmers will go back to public services. Speaking this morning, the Chancellor said that farmers as well rely on good public services, including the NHS and schools, adding that the funds generated by these tax changes will also put public finances on a firm footing. When challenged by Camilla Tominey on the inheritance tax changes, Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray, said that the existing features of the inheritance tax system will still apply.
This means in practice
is that in most cases, if you have a couple who are passing on a farm to the next generation, they will get £2 or £3 million, which is not subject to inheritance tax. So above that £2 or £3 million, so paying no inheritance tax on that first £2 or £3 million, above that, the rate will be half what it is for everyone else.
A joint investigation from both Channel 4 and the Sunday Times has revealed the full details of the property estates owned by King Charles and Prince William. The investigation shows the vast array of commercial property the royal family has built up from the time of medieval monarchs. Their contracts with public bodies are said to include a £37 million agreement with the Ministry of Justice and an £11.4 million deal with Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Trust. A spokesman for the Duchy of Cornwall said that it was a private estate with a commercial imperative, while the Duchy of Lancaster said that their business complies with all relevant UK legislation and regulatory standards. It comes as Prince William travels to South Africa this week for his Earthshot Prize award ceremony. The prize is hoped to recognise environmental solutions to repair the planet. To the US, where there are now just 2 days to go until the election, and shock polling from a traditionally Republican Iowa has placed Democratic candidate Kamala Harris ahead of Donald Trump by 3 points. It comes as Kamala Harris appeared overnight in a comedy sketch on Saturday Night Live in New York, where comedian Maya Rudolph dressed as the current vice president. Polls elsewhere in states such as Pennsylvania and Michigan show that the two candidates are tied ahead of Election Day on Tuesday. A man has died and 6 other people have been taken to hospital after a collision between 2 cars at a crossroads in Cornwall. An 18-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving and causing death by careless driving while unfit through drink or drugs. Emergency services were called to reports of a collision between St Tudy and St Breward late on Friday evening, Devon and Cornwall police have said. A 19-year-old man, a front-seat passenger in one of the cars, died at the scene. The 6 people taken to hospital are thought to have minor injuries, the force said. It's understood that police investigating historical sex offence allegations against actor and comedian Russell Brand have handed a file of evidence to the Crown Prosecution Service. A statement from the Metropolitan Police late last night said that following an investigation by Channel 4's dispatchers and the Sunday Times in September 2023, the Met received a number of reports of sexual offences between 2006 and 2013 from women in London and elsewhere in the country. A file has now been handed to the CPS for their consideration. Brand has denied the allegations against him and said his relationships were always consensual. Those are your latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Michael.
Sir Keir Starmer has suffered the biggest post-election fall in approval ratings of any British Prime Minister in the modern era. Labour MPs and supporters have been appalled to discover that he and other members of the Cabinet have been taking lavish freebies, while the winter fuel allowance has been abolished for most pensioners. Voters who turned on the Conservatives at the election, concerned about immigration and crime, have seen the boats continue to arrive with high numbers and have been shocked as thousands of prisoners were released. Now employers must pay national insurance contributions on all pay above £5,000 a year and at a higher rate than before. It's natural to doubt whether the economy will grow and to fear that employment will fall and wages stagnate. So does Kemi Badenoch, the new Conservative Party leader, face an open goal? And has she good opportunities to unite her party against the government? I'm rejoined by Matthew Lazar, Madeline Grant and Patrick O'Flynn. Madeline, what do you think of the open goal theory?
Well, I think that Labour has become astonishingly unpopular in a very short amount of time, more than I think anyone imagined. This doesn't necessarily translate into an open goal for the Tories, for the reason that just because Labour are also hated, the Tories were similarly hated. I mean, they're currently 1 percentage point ahead of Labour, which suggests to me that they're both pretty despised right now. And in a more fragmented electoral landscape, where you have, insurgent parties, in the last discussion we had, we were talking about how many MPs are sitting on tiny majorities. I think the era of any kind of party loyalty and stability is kind of gone. So voters feeling very hard done by right now, but I think the Tories risk becoming complacent and getting into their comfort zone and basically being reluctant to talk about why so many people roundly rejected them at the last election.
But in a party, Madeleine, that is disunited, at least attacking the government is a unifying factor. But I mean, the things that Labour are doing are not controversial in the Conservative Party. They're opposed, surely, by everyone in the Conservative Party.
Yes, and in fact, I think the way that Labour are going about their business is really to essentially look for a group of loyal voters, mostly in the public sector, absolutely rinse everyone else to pay for that level of spending and basically keep this group of people very much on side. But in doing that kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul politics, you create a very strong and often well-mobilised coalition against you, employers, small business owners, farmers, anyone who sends their child to a private school. Taken on their own, perhaps these groups are not decisive, but they have successfully mobilised potentially a voting bloc against them. But it's obviously, I think that the Conservative Party have still a lot of soul-searching to do, and complacency is a big risk because we're in a politics of, I think, rejectionism. Whoever is in charge seems to be hated pretty damn quickly. And how we get past that. I mean, I don't doubt that if we were to elect some kind of coalition involving Martin Lewis and David Attenborough, within about 5 minutes, everyone would hate them too. You know what I mean?
Patrick, whom does Kemi Badenoch have to beat, Reform or the Labour Party?
The Labour Party. The Conservatives lost 5 seats to Reform at the general election. I think they lost getting on for 170 to the Labour Party. And I think, for the reasons you set out in your introduction and that Madeleine has amplified, this is, if not an open goal for Kemi Badenoch, the goalkeeper's fallen on his backside and there are no defenders protecting the goal line. I think she has enormous upside possibility, and Madeleine mentioned one poll showing the Tories on 29 and Labour on 28. Well, that was the first Conservative lead for 3 years. I think Rishi Sunak showed some real fire and passion in his reply to the budget. It's an incredibly sectarian Labour Party, favouring all its client groups, not being cognizant of the promises and the big offer it made. I think Kemi is someone that people will look at and think, well, she's a bit different. And people say it's a disadvantage that she's not that popular among Conservative MPs. Well, Conservative MPs aren't uniquely popular in the country among the sort of people who would vote Conservative. So if she plays her cards right, I think the Conservatives can be in a healthy poll lead by the end of this month, and that the jitters will then start infecting the Labour Party. As Matthew mentioned, many of these Labour MPs are sitting on majorities of 5,000 or less in seats which are not historically Labour-leaning seats. And, I can see, Labour going into a tailspin. But a final point, Nigel Farage tried to characterise Kemi as being sort of dead on arrival on the basis she hasn't pledged to leave the European Court of Human Rights, and I understand why he did that. But equally, you get an echo chamber on the left. There's an echo chamber on the right in social media that says, oh, she can't revive the Tories because she's failed this test of purity. I think in the country at large, the Tory brand, what do you do if you don't like Labour? For most normal people who aren't politically obsessives, you give the Conservatives a look. So I see, quite exciting times for the Tories in the run-up before Christmas and into the new year.
Matthew, one reason why I thought Mr Jenrick deserved to lose was precisely because he pledged to leave the ECHR. It's not that I have a particularly strong opinion on it myself, it's that it seems to me 5 years premature to be making a pledge at all. And it's going to divide the Conservative Party from top to bottom. Kemi Badenoch seems to be taking a more sensible view, which is to go back to basics, try and discover what the Conservative Party is about and evolve policies from principles. Does that strike you as an interesting approach?
I think it's an interesting approach, but I'm not sure it's one that's going to hold water because, yes, I mean, of course, absolutely. At the moment, the Tories are facing a weak defence line. Labour's had a difficult first few months, but if the government is going to have any chance of surviving and getting re-elected, then it's going to have to strengthen that defence, get its ducks in a line, pick whichever cliche we want to, but it's going to have to get better. Otherwise, it's going to collapse. So on that basis, that Labour's at its at its lowest point and will get itself together. I think the Tories are going to find the problem, which is getting a little traction today, which Labour is saying is, OK, you don't like the tax rises, what would you cut? You don't want this money going into the NHS. You don't want the schools to rebuild, to be rebuilt. And I think that she's going to be forced into specifics by others. She may want to say, oh, we're going to look at principles, we're going to have a 3-year policy review. And that's fine in terms of stuff you want to be proactive on. But you are going to have to answer questions of what would you do now, because you can't just criticise the government. You've got to give it
up to a point, Matthew. I mean, Madeleine was saying that the Conservatives need to learn the lessons of why they lost the election, but they should also learn the lessons of what it is to be in opposition. And what Labour showed, I thought rather skillfully in opposition, was that you commit to absolutely nothing.
Exactly.
You just criticise the government for everything. You don't commit to anything.
Well, that's because...
that's now backfired on them.
Yeah,
they obviously lied.
Well, yes,
partly.
But they are in power, no, you're right.
The government would... the Conservatives would love the luxury of having got into power and then being accused of lying.
Yes,
but as long as they were in power. I mean, I think that what happened is the Tories weren't good at trying to... because of their own omni-shambles, as it were, with 3 leaders in such a short period of time, they weren't in a position where they could press Labour to be more specific. They tried it with the Labour hasn't got a plan, etc. I think that Labour in government will actually be united in saying to the Tories, what would you cut? What would you do? You say you do things differently. You want to back all these groups who are protesting because, you know, the farmers, some small business owners, etc. But actually, OK, if you wouldn't impose those taxes, what you're saying is people wouldn't have quicker access to a GP appointment and people wouldn't have your school rebuilt. But obviously, for the government's point of view, those GP appointments have got to become available and those schools have got to be rebuilt. But
I'm not convinced the public thinks that we should give almost £10 billion to Ed Miliband to set up an energy quango. You know, this implies that everything that Labour has committed is a wonderful use of taxpayers' money. I think a lot of it is incredibly foolish and will leave us poor in the long term.
But also, I was Shadow Chancellor, and of course the game that the government tries to trap you into is precisely what Matthew has described. So, you know, you must make all the sums add up. That is what a Shadow Chancellor must never fall into doing.
Yes.
Shadow Chancellor must remain fairly vague and generalising.
I think that's right, and project sort of vibes of seriousness and authority, but without being defined by all these strange ways Labour's trying to lock in high public spending. I actually think, though, that there is some scope in public opinion to identify waste in the public sector. You know, the productivity story of the public sector is enormously disappointing. Can you imagine this Labour government facing up to the vested interests and getting more for our taxpayer pounds? I think you look at Kemi Badenoch and her backstory and you know, even the broader Tory party, you would say they might be a bit better at doing that, apart from perhaps Wes Streeting in the NHS. He's one of the only Labour cabinet performers I can think of who even contemplates the idea of having to try and win support beyond the natural core votes. But I think, you know, again, there's plenty of upside scope for Kemi, and she's going to do very well.
Madeleine, let me ask you about Kemi. First of all, do you think the difficulty that she sometimes displays in getting on with people is going to be a disadvantage? Secondly, do you think that she can bring about a sort of firming of the philosophical base of conservatism of the sort that Margaret Thatcher achieved?
Well, on the first question, I think, yes, it's simultaneously what makes her an interesting, charismatic politician, that she is punchy and that she can really defend her positions robustly. And I think that actually appeals to, despite what some in Labour have said, I think a lot of members of the public in focus groups often talk about she tells it like it is, and they like people who tell it like it is. But on the other hand, that is also potentially her Achilles heel, because it's that same brashness that means that she doesn't get on fantastic with all of her colleagues, and she has a tendency to rub people up the wrong way.
Which is also very reminiscent of Margaret Thatcher, by the way.
Although I think that with Margaret Thatcher, she was always scrupulously polite to people she viewed as, like, her inferior. It's not her inferior, but you know what I mean. She was often rude to her peers, whereas, you know, Kemi Badenoch has a difficult relationship with the media, for example. There are lots of journalists who will get an earful from her if she thinks that she's been misquoted. I think that they need to get a grip on that, because if you're going to get things through, you cannot fall into the habit of being sidetracked by sort of petty arguments. You've got to keep your eye on the bigger picture. But the thing about Kemi is that she's also surrounded by some very talented people. A lot of the cleverest MPs are the ones supporting her. So I think she's got a really good team, and she has some incredible personal qualities, but she has this Achilles heel that she needs to get a grip on.
Matthew, sincerely, honestly, do you think that Kemi is the Conservative leader that the Labour Party feared?
No. In absolute honesty, I think. I mean, look, congratulations on winning. I can understand, Tories thinking this is a fresh start. I think the issue is one of the problems is she may take the Tories back to philosophical roots and make it clearer. But if she's going to be going on and on about a smaller state, all polling evidence says people don't want a smaller state. What they want is a more effective state. And for example, in terms of her, not just her getting on with people, but it's her loose lipness, which I think is going to be an issue. This morning, she's done an interview in which she said that the Partygate wasn't. She sort of condemned people who criticised Partygate. If I was I wouldn't want to be reopening the Partygate can of worms in my first interview. So I think that yes, she's obviously an interesting and an engaging person in some ways, but it's that sort of telling it as the truth. Sometimes it's better to leave things unsaid, and I'm not sure she's quite learnt that yet.
Can I just say on the Partygate thing? I think that is a slightly unfair interpretation of what she said. I read her when she was. I think she's sometimes careless in her language, and it creates problems for her. But I think what she was trying to say was that the original sin of Partygate was the fact that politicians imposed this incredibly draconian regime on ordinary people. And we talk a lot about Partygate scandal, but the biggest scandal was that people were not allowed to visit their families and stuff. Which,
but do you remember when 90%? She's got to remember that's a nice debating point for over a Conservative dinner party about whether or not and I actually think the rules were too draconian, and that makes me unpopular in the Labour Party. But you've got to remember that at the time, 90% of the public were asking for more lockdown.
But
so
when we survey the wreckage, no one cares what their position was at the time. They care that we are poor and that we still haven't dealt with many of the problems that were caused by lockdown.
I'm afraid I care about sticking to the schedule, and I'm so sorry to say that we've run out of time. But thank you very much to Matthew Lazar, Madeline Grant and Patrick O'Flynn. Coming up, we'll be making music as we uncover the newly formed Chromatica Orchestra, which has recently made its debut on the stage. The orchestral lead, Maren Bosner, will share her experience of setting up an ensemble from scratch. Back in 3 minutes.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Let's speak now to Charlie Mullins, who's the founder of Pimlico Plumbers, and entrepreneur Oliver Hodgson. Really good to see you both this morning. Charlie, let's start with you. Has working from home and the culture surrounding working from home killed work experience, do you think?
Undoubtedly. Many companies now are not getting youngsters in for the work experience because of the fact they don't have the staff in. So if they're only in 2 days a week, they're not going to get in the youngsters. They've got no one to train them. So it's killed it totally. And if you think it's bad now, probably 4 or 5 years from now, it'll be absolutely ridiculous. This working from home, I said from day one, is going to kill youngsters' futures, youngsters' careers, and getting people into the workplace. So now the damage is showing through, unfortunately. COVID finished a couple of years ago. The working from home should have stopped and get people back into the workplace.
I mean, Oliver, you have to say it's difficult to see how people in a work-from-home environment can do any sort of on-the-job training at all.
It's really interesting, the work experience piece, actually, because we ran an internship program in the summer here. We had 5 people in the office in person and they really thrived. But we did have a couple of people who joined remotely because of their own reasons, right, and where they were. I think it's a bit more nuanced than that as well, because I've got clients who have completely remote teams. Now, I don't. I have an office and our team are based in here. But our clients who do, they're able to offer work experience opportunities digitally with fantastic technology to people across the world, right? So they have people in their team who are working from all sorts of different continents, which is obviously fantastic. But I agree with Charlie, right? You cannot knock in-person engagement. You cannot knock being in the office.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday Morning with Michael Portillo. On the 8th of October at Battersea Arts Centre, a new orchestra launched its inaugural season. The orchestra, which is named Chromatica, is formed of some of the best young musicians in Britain. They're due to perform in traditional venues and in community spaces. The aim is to bring their youth and dynamism to a wide repertoire of music. Predominantly, they'll work with emerging conductors who will have the chance to shape the orchestra and its repertoire. To share her experiences of bringing the ensemble together, I'm joined by the violinist and Chromatica Orchestra lead, Maren Bosma. Welcome to GB News.
Thank you.
Fantastic what you're able to do here. To what extent is this novel? To what extent is this new ground?
Well, new ground, it is new ground in a sense that this is a completely new orchestra. Obviously, in the current sort of cultural climate, it's not really easy to set up a new orchestra. And so in that sense, it's a novelty for us to kind of try and carve out our space in the current climate of musical orchestras and musicians in Britain.
Yes, I mean, it's quite odd in a way to think of a new orchestra because the ones that we have tend to be struggling and numbers indeed have been reduced. I used to be associated with an orchestra which unfortunately went under. You've got some private backing for this.
Yeah.
Why do you think the private backers have been willing to give you support? What is it that they see as your unique selling proposition?
Well, Chromatica Orchestra essentially is an early career orchestra. So we're formed of all sort of top musicians who've graduated in, say, the last sort of 5 to 10 years. Because everyone is of that generation, there is a sort of enthusiasm and dynamism that we bring to the stage that I think is quite unique. And the orchestra's mission is unique in that it's really focused on creating opportunities for young emerging musicians. And at the same time, we're also sort of forging a whole new generation of musicians and music lovers by working with these primary and secondary schools and working with young children, playing alongside them. So hopefully they will grow up and sort of be really involved in the cultural sector as well.
So let me just try and understand that clearly. So the orchestra is made up of young musicians towards the start of their careers, but then in addition to that, it plays alongside musicians who are at school. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's an additional opportunity. So without the existence of Chromatica, is it very difficult for the young musicians who form the members of the orchestra, is it very difficult for them to get their first opportunity, to get their experience of performing alongside fellow musicians in a public arena to an audience?
Yeah, I would say it's not easy. There aren't that many opportunities going around, especially since COVID. It's been quite difficult to be a newly graduated musician. I mean, it's not impossible. I think in my experience, it's been quite a challenge to kind of get into the circuit. It's kind of once you're in, there are opportunities here and there, but everyone's a freelancer. You never know what's going to be happening sort of 1 to 2 months from now. So there's always this sort of sense of insecurity of like, what am I going to be doing next? So that's kind of the challenge of being a young musician at the moment. And I think that Chromatica Orchestra helps sort of just create a few extra opportunities for musicians who are keen to get work, so to speak.
Tell me about your artistic achievements so far. What kind of reviews has the orchestra had in its performances?
So our relaunch or our launch got 5 stars in Backtrack, and they talked about sort of the breadth and dynamism of the musicians and of the programming. The program was quite exciting. We had sort of a pretty wide scope of different types of music at that concert. So we had Barber Violin Concerto, so that was sort of very British music with an amazing violinist, Christine Balanas. We had some Spanish music by De Falla. So yeah, we sort of had quite a dynamic program, and I think everyone was really happy to be there. So yeah.
And you then played alongside Christina Bolanos, is that right?
Yes, yeah, we played two movements of the Prokofiev Sonata for two violin. Yeah.
Fabulous. That must have been a great experience for you.
Yeah, it was really nice.
Was it a piece you'd had the opportunity to play before?
No, I'd never played it before. I've always wanted to play it because it's a really cool piece, but I'd never played it. So it was nice to learn it for this. I think Christine hadn't played it before either, so yeah, she also really enjoyed doing it, and yeah, she was a joy to work with. So it was really fun to do that.
With what other noted professionals do you have dates in the future?
So for our next concert, which is on the 11th, we're working with Ben Goldscheider, who's a star horn player. We've got a violin concerto coming up with Valery Sokolov, if I'm not mistaken. And then, yeah, we've got some smaller things as well. Well, not really smaller, but sort of non-soloist things like, for example, family concert at Battersea Arts Centre in February. But yeah, our main focus at the moment is Southwark Cathedral on the 11th of November, so Armistice Day, with Ben Goldscheider.
That sounds very exciting, both of those. Now, you're drawing your musicians from all over the country, but it sounds like your venues are in London, or is that a misreading? Are you going to go around the country as well?
Yeah, I think, well, we've got one concert this season that's going to be at Saffron Hall. And I think for future seasons, we're looking into sort of branching outside of London and expanding our educational programme beyond London as well. But for this season, our home basically is the Battersea Arts Centre, which is near Clapham Junction. Yeah, and so it's mainly London at the moment, but we're branching out as well.
Where do you hope the orchestra will be, let's say, in 2 years' time?
Well, I hope that we can sort of keep increasing the amount of concerts we do over the next few seasons, and also because there's so much amazing music out there, and I want to play all of it, and I know that my colleagues want to as well. So, you know, the more concerts you can give, the more opportunities you can create for young musicians, and the more beautiful music you can play. So that would be my main wish. I hope that we can just keep growing and yeah, really sort of make a name for ourselves and what we do, which I think is really valuable. So yeah, I hope that will just keep going like that.
Aaron Bosma, congratulations on what you've achieved. Good luck with what's to come.
Thanks.
Coming up, we'll be examining why Germany cannot modernise its economy with Wolfgang Munchau. But first, your latest headlines with Katie Boy.
Michael, thank you. Your top stories this hour. Following her victory in the Conservative Party leadership election yesterday, Kemi Badenoch has vowed to ensure a fresh start for the party ahead of announcing her shadow cabinet. Kemi Badenoch won more than 53,000 votes in the contest, while rival Robert Jenrick received 41,000. Mrs Badenoch is expected to name her shadow cabinet in the coming days ahead of their first meeting on Tuesday, with former contenders Robert Jenrick, Tom Tugendhat, Mel Stride and Dame Priti Patel reportedly open to frontbench positions. Elsewhere, Labour MP Dawn Butler shared a social media post accusing Kemi Badenoch of representing white supremacy and blackface shortly before she was elected as the new Tory leader. The Brent East MP has since deleted the repost from her X profile, and neither Downing Street nor Dawn Butler have made any comment on the post. Camilla Tominey asked former Conservative Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng about it a short time ago.
She's a race baiter. Why has she still got the whip?
Look, that's up to Labour.
What do you think, genuinely?
I genuinely think that, given what she said, she should have the whip removed from her. There should be some discipline and some disciplinary measure against this kind of really hateful device.
I was reminded.
Well, the fallout to Rachel Reeves's budget continues today as she explained that the money raised through changes to inheritance tax for farmers will go back to public services. Speaking this morning, the Chancellor said that farmers as well rely on good public services, including the NHS and schools, adding that funds generated by these tax changes will also put public finances on a firm footing. When challenged by Camilla Tominey on the inheritance tax changes, Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray, said that the existing features of the inheritance tax system will still apply.
This means in practice is that in most cases, if you have a couple who are passing on a farm to the next generation, they will get £2 or £3 million, which is not subject to inheritance tax. So above that £2 or £3 million, so paying no inheritance tax on that first £2 or £3 million. Above that, the rate will be half what it is for everyone else.
A joint investigation from both Channel 4 and the Sunday Times has revealed the full details of the property estates owned by King Charles and Prince William. The investigation shows the vast array of commercial property the royal family has built up from the time of medieval monarchs. Their contracts with public bodies are said to include a £37 million agreement with the Ministry of Justice and an £11.4 million deal with the Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Trust. A spokesman for the Duchy of Cornwall said that it was a private estate with a commercial imperative, while the Duchy of Lancaster said that their business complies with all relevant UK legislation and regulatory standards. It comes as Prince William travels to South Africa this week for his Earthshot Prize award ceremony. The prize is hoped to recognise environmental solutions to repair the planet. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. It may be Sunday, but the sun is certainly lacking for many of us. Instead, we're left with anticyclonic gloom. Whilst we're used to high pressure bringing us fairly fine and settled conditions, often in autumn and winter we can find a layer of cloud stuck underneath it, and that is what we have at the moment. Widespread grey skies for the vast majority of us. There will be some outbreaks of drizzle around at times. The best of the sunshine is going to be reserved for northern Scotland, where we'll see the brightest skies. Temperatures generally around average for the time of year, between 12 and 14 degrees Celsius, but those stuck underneath that cloud will feel quite chilly, particularly indoors. That cloud will be remaining with us as we head into the evening and overnight period, so if you do have any fireworks celebrations this evening, it should stay largely dry, still though with the odd spot of drizzle around at times. The best of those clearer spells really remaining in place for northern Scotland. Elsewhere, it is going to be a very cloudy one, quite misty and murky around coastal districts, and the cloud will be lowering into this evening as well, so over the hills we could see some hill fog around at times to provide murky conditions here as well. That relatively similar pattern will continue right throughout the night, where we hold on to the cloud. It does though mean that temperatures will hold up quite a bit, so most of us will see positive single figures at least, but if you do see a few clearer spells around again, particularly for northern Scotland, temperatures will drop off a little bit more here. There could be some patchy frost for the far north of the Highlands first thing on Monday morning. For many of us on Monday, we do it all over again. That cloud is really quite stubborn and is going to be persistent right throughout the day. But there are a few signs of a change. Perhaps in the far southeast we could see some brightening skies, as well as Western Wales, Western Northern Ireland and Western Scotland starting to see the sunshine poking through later on in the day. Temperatures down by a degree or so, now more between 10 and 12 degrees Celsius. And the outlook really is not particularly inspiring. Quite a lot of cloud for all of us, really persisting, some overnight fog to watch out for as well, but it will be turning a little bit milder.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets and My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Germany was once an economic model to emulate. Angela Merkel was widely regarded as the true leader of the free world, and the country's export-driven economic model provoked envy. However, the economy is now stuck. It was overly reliant on Russia for gas and is overly dependent on China for export markets and raw materials. Its cosy consensus of politicians, bankers and industrialists is incapable of innovating. Those are the arguments in a new book, Kaputt, The author Wolfgang Muchow joins me now. Very nice to see you, Wolfgang, indeed. It's interesting about this cosy consensus of industrialists, politicians and bankers. It's another thing that we were encouraged to envy. You know, if only in Britain we could get everyone to work together the way they do in Germany, is what we used to be told. Yeah. But tell me why you think this combination has been so lethal to the failure to innovate.
Yeah, I mean, the German consensus depended very much on 20th century technology, and they inherited that from the 19th century. The Germans were top physicists in that century, all the way up to the Second World War, and the engineering industry that blossomed after the Second World War was very much steeped into mechanical engineering, chemical engineering inventions, basically that had their sort of scientific root in the 19th century, and they have stayed in that realm.
Yes.
They did not even invent the digital world. They try to keep and stick to their 20th century business models. And this is what the consensus did. The consensus, everyone was around, even today. Everybody agrees in Germany, whether they're on the left or the right, that this is an industrial society. They just have the classic left and right differences about whether we should be on the side of the workers or on the side of the employers. But in the end, it is an attempt, as I wrote in the book, it's an attempt to succeed in the 21st century with companies from the 20th century and technologies from the 19th century. So that's not working.
Tell us what you mean by mercantilism. You say that Germany is addicted to mercantilism.
Yeah, mercantilism is a new form of mercantilism. This is not the old sort of 18th century French version. This is running export surpluses, and it's becoming a model. So it's not an accident, or it's not a result of what happens in the economy. I don't advocate balance at all times. This is nonsense. But Germany needs to run surpluses, export surpluses, in order to exist, basically, in order to have economic growth. If Germany doesn't have export surpluses, it is in recession. And it has run extreme export surpluses. It was 8.5% of GDP. It's a bit lower now, but it's still very large. And that shouldn't be the case. It's a large economy. Small island economies run very large surpluses, and that's not like Iceland. But a large economy like Germany is the fourth largest economy in the world, should not be running export surplus. It should be more diversified. And when shocks like Russia and Brexit was a big shock for the German economy, and Russia and China's new economic course come, then there is nothing to fall back on, and that's essentially they're trying at the moment. What they're doing, they're trying to make this old system work again, so cutting costs but if you look at, say, the famous example of the car industry. The problem with the Volkswagen, they have two problems. They have a cost basis that is too high, and they need to do something about it, which they are. But they also have a problem with their products. The German cars are no longer at the cutting edge of the modern car industry.
No, they are the Chinese cars.
That's right. The modern German cars are at the cutting edge of fuel-driven cars. They're still in that segment top, but in electronic cars, both in the software and the energy, the battery technology, they are falling behind.
And if that consensus of industrialists and bankers and politicians reads your book, will they be incapable of saying, Wolfgang's got it right, and we need to make a shift?
Yeah, I don't think that will happen. They will read the book, but I don't think that will happen, because this is the problem with the consensus model. It is very much a model that does not favour dissenting voices. It's a problem. I had a correspondent who wrote to me. He worked for one of the largest car companies, and he said he actually invented, like 15 years ago, he developed for his company a prototype of a car that's the kind of which you see in China. The company arrogantly dismissed it. He left the company, and then in a scramble, because they panicked, they adopted exactly his model, like 10 years too late. That's the kind of thing that happens in society, where everybody believes this is the right thing, and there isn't sort of a strong minority opinion of people who say, no, we can do this differently. And I think they will eventually get there, but things have to go wrong first.
Which they are. And give me a sentence or two on over-dependency on China. What are the dangers there?
Well, the danger is that the German companies under the Merkel era discover China as their main market, both for exports but also for investments. And the danger is that companies like Volkswagen, like BASF, the chemical giant, have invested so much into the Chinese market, they are totally dependent on this. So this is not just a matter of selling fewer cars to them. It is a matter of extricating yourself from a strategy that's been going on for 20 years. The other problem with China is that China is now encroaching onto areas that the Germans monopolized. It's not just modern cars, but it's also machine tools, it's also chemicals. And the Chinese are doing the same stuff better and cheaper. They are going into areas the Germans thought they had for themselves, like environmental technologies. The Chinese are awfully good at this. They are now monopolizing the market for solar panels. This is a problem. So this is a dual problem for Germany, that their own sort of, even if mechanical industries, we see mechanics is no longer as important as digital, but even in those segments, they're getting challenged by the Chinese, but the Chinese are definitely ahead on all things digital, especially software, AI. These are areas where Germany has not invested enough.
So, just to give a plug to your book is called Kaputt. It doesn't even have a subtitle, does it? What is it?
It has a subtitle. It says the decline of the German economy, but this is kaputt is basically what it is. A joke, obviously. It's not kaputt in the sense that it will never recover. It will, but a model died. That is for sure, and therefore it is actually right. Because an economic model, a belief system almost has really ended, or is ending.
So the belief system is kaputt. Thank you very much indeed, Wolfgang Munchau. Stay tuned, because after the break we'll be whisked away for our Taste of Britain and joined by Johnny Crowe, Executive Chef of Restaurant St Bart's, London's only Michelin and Green Michelin star restaurant.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Online dating apps are still the go-to for millions of British adults, with 1 in 10 using them to look for a romantic connection.
Yes, are you one of them? Let us know. But with many apps introducing subscription fees and complex algorithms, the world of online dating has never been harder to navigate. So who better to join us to discuss this than Mr. Tinder himself, Stéphane Pierre Tomlin. You have been dubbed Britain's best-looking eligible bachelor.
Yeah, so this happened back in 2016. Got an email from Tinder, and it was like, "You're the most swiped man on Tinder."
So just explain to us, for viewers who don't know, what is swiping? What does that mean on Tinder?
Yeah, so on Tinder, the app, if you swipe left, that means you don't like the person in front of you, and if you swipe to the right, that means you like that person.
Do you mind still being associated with that? It's a good thing.
Well, it made me who I am now, and I love sharing how I was successful, and now I'm like a dating expert.
What's your situation now? Are you with anyone? Are you still single, paying the bill?
So I'm seeing someone at the minute. Things are going well, and I'm a dating expert, so I'm always giving advice to people.
Does she know your title of most swiped?
Of course, who doesn't? It's quite hard. It's quite hard being the most swiped man on Tinder because you get a label on you. So I find it harder than anyone else, to be honest.
And where did you meet her? That's the big question.
At an event.
So not on Tinder?
Not on Tinder, ironically.
So for all that troubled online, it's actually a real life rendezvous. Which
I mean, I have met people on Tinder in the past, and it has worked. Well, it didn't work, but yeah.
I need to know how to do the famous Stefan Smolder.
That camera is not a camera. That is your best friend, that's your lover. So you really smiles from the camera, so it goes like this.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwir, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference
It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday Morning with Michael Portillo. It's now time for our Taste of Britain spot. At Restaurant St Bart's, executive head chef Johnny Crowe creates ramen with a British twist, using only the finest UK-sourced produce. As the only restaurant in London to hold both a Michelin star and a green Michelin star, St Bart's emphasises sustainability and the diversity of British ingredients. Johnny joins me now. Johnny, congratulations on having these 2 Michelins. How do you get a Michelin green star?
Probably a better question for the inspectors, but I mean, I think it's down to a lot of hard work.
What hoops do you have to go through?
So I think it's working every day on it. The sustainability isn't something that you just achieve and then therefore you have it and you can sort of relax. It's about every day trying to be better, trying to make a restaurant and a business that is overly sustainable.
So what things do you do to make it sustainable?
So one of the main things that we've really tried to do is focusing on British produce, and actually, you know, part of that is about sustainability and food miles. A massive part of it for us was also about sort of helping the British economy and the farming economy and our fisheries as well. But yeah, no, the idea...
You have a lot of farms near St Bart's, which is in the heart of the City of London.
Well, funnily enough, there's an amazing collective called Shrub Provisions, who we use a hell of a lot, who work with farmers all around East Sussex. So it makes a difference from flying it in from Kenya or somewhere else like that. But no, like a big part of it was, one, using British produce to cut down on food miles, but also helping sustain our farming industry. And then 2, it was about, you know, really trying to get to the heart of like what these people are doing and what they are growing, and what interesting flavours you can get from these amazing people who are growing incredible things that they're really passionate about as well. When you go and meet these people, they're incredibly passionate about what they do. I think as well, like using the whole carcass of animals, not having wastage, which obviously on a tasting menu is much easier than a la carte.
David Thompson earlier brought me a great big plate of curry, and you brought quite a tiny thing here.
Yes,
but don't worry, we're not judging you on that. But what's in this delicious bowl here?
So this is like one of the dishes that we have at the restaurant, which really highlights how bountiful the seas around the coastline of Great Britain are at the moment. It's British sashimi. So it takes you on a journey of different flavours of fish that you can get throughout the British coastlines. We also have our homemade soy sauce, which I brought you as well. I didn't bring you some wine, but I brought you our soy.
It's amazing you can't pass security without a bottle of wine. So how should I apply that?
As much as you want, yeah. So I would season each piece of fish with the soy. They each have a little condiment on them as well, which is to highlight that exact fish. So I would start with the piece of sea bass there. So it's line-caught British sea bass, and it's going with British padron peppers. So we lightly cure the fish, just to help with the texture of it. And then we put in...
That is divine.
Yeah, and then a very humble fish, so basically a mackerel next.
This is a mackerel?
So the mackerel is, again, very lightly cured, and then we just debone it, and it's going with a smoked mackerel oil. So we take the bones of the fish, we cure them and smoke them, and then we top it with some British ginger as well. So ginger grown by a couple called the Allwoods, who run a farm in East Sussex.
I must say, these fish are just so fresh and so beautiful. So what have I got there? A little...
So this is really interesting. This is British tuna. So tuna weren't seen in British waters for over 60 years. In 2019, they started to see tuna numbers come back into British waters. And then there was a really good sustainable fishing project that was brought in, which means that only 13 boats can fish line-caught British tuna, which is really helping the numbers of the fish, and each year they're seeing more and more numbers of bluefin tuna coming in. That piece was from the belly, so very fatty.
Absolutely fascinating. You didn't train as a chef. You went to university, but
yeah,
you made your way from there.
Yeah, so I'd always loved cooking. It was a passion of mine since I was very, very young. Yeah, after university, I knew I definitely wanted to be a chef. But I ended up going to Uganda, and I worked at a safari lodge. I worked for 4 months, training some of the guys who had worked to build the lodge to be chefs.
Well, it's all paid off with St. Bart's, and your food is glorious, and you've won the Green Michelin star as well as the Michelin star. That's Johnny Crow from St. Bart's. Well, I hope that we have nourished your mind today with our discussions of politics, economics and culture. With our 2 features on food, I hope that we have built up for you a substantial appetite for your Sunday lunch. I want to thank all my guests for being here today and for being so interesting. I'll be back next week, and coming up now is The Weekend with Dawn Neeson. Stay tuned for that. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, very good afternoon to you. This is your latest GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. We often refer to high pressure as our fair weather friends, but many of us may not be feeling particularly friendly towards the area of high pressure that we have at the moment, because it is trapping a lot of cloud across much of the UK, and because high pressure is a blocking pattern, it can stay with us for a long period of time. The cloud is also going to be lingering with us for quite a while as well. If you do have any fireworks celebrations this evening, the cloud may bring the odd spot of drizzle in places, particularly around Irish Sea coastal districts. But underneath that cloud, temperatures will hold up, so many of us will be on the positive side of the temperature scale. But a patchy frost is possible across the far north of Scotland, where we do see some clearer spells around. As you start off the new working week then, do be prepared for a widespread amount of grey skies above you. Again, there will be the odd spot of drizzle to watch out for, particularly along this western side of things. Most of England and Wales managing to stay dry at least. For the start of Monday morning, the best of that brightness is once again going to be across northern areas of Scotland. As we do head throughout the rest of the day, though, there is the potential that we start to see a few more breaks developing at times, particularly for western parts of Northern Ireland, western Wales, parts of Cornwall, but also maybe in the far southeast of England, just seeing a bit of influence from this clearing skies over France and continental Europe. Temperatures tomorrow probably down by a degree or so compared to what we do see today. Most of us seeing the thermometer rise to around 11 to 13 degrees Celsius and feeling quite chilly where you are, stuck underneath that widespread cloud. Into the evening, again, the cloud will be quite stagnant for most of us. Where we do start to see a few breaks developing, though, there is the potential that that allows for some fog developing overnight. So it could be quite misty and murky first thing on Tuesday morning for many of us. The cloud, as I've mentioned, is really going to be staying with us throughout much of the next few days, but it will be turning a little bit milder. Bye-bye. Enjoy the rest of your day.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're giving you the chance to win everything you need to celebrate the festivities. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Court cases.
A president